Hello, it's Kate Griffiths here from Whole Self Leadership, and I'm coming on because I want to talk to you about chapter 2 of our book. And I thought today, partly because I've got a bit of backache, but also because when you're reading you want to be sat in a fabulous chair. So I'm in my father's old rocking chair from when he was a child, which we reclaimed. This is the book, Philosophy for Life. And we're on chapter 2, having jumped to chapter 5. It's a long story, and it's the first of 3 chapters that looks at Stoicism. And I thought I knew what Stoicism was pretty well, because I think of my husband as quite a Stoic. He never complains, just gets on and does things. Anyway, in the book, it opens with a story about a prisoner of war, a female, and it's a fairly horrific and graphic story, which I won't go into. You can find out more if you choose to read the book. And reading it reminded me very much of something that Viktor Frankl wrote many years ago. And if you don't know who he is, he was a POW in the Second World War. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, people can take everything from you except for one thing, which is the last of human freedoms, and that is how we choose to respond to the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and having the ability to choose our own way through it. So it reminds me a bit, I've been doing some work with some other people on the 7 spiritual laws, and today we're looking at the law of karma. To put it in perspective, what Frankl was saying and what the spiritual laws say is we cannot choose our dharma, our purpose, what's going to happen to us in the world. Where we do get free will is how we respond to those external events. And I guess in essence, that's what Stoicism is all about, is, as Covey said, when he, in the 7 Habits of Successful People, he sort of talked about it in terms of 2 circles. So the outer circle of concern, where you might be interested in world events and things outside of your locus of control, but actually where you would be much happier if you focus on the things within your circle of influence, so the stuff that you can influence and you can change. So I think that's an interesting idea to consider, the truth of that and how much that plays a part. And to help me with this, I called on this particular spritzer today, which is a kind of yellowy gold, more gold than yellow. It's called metal, and we are in a metal year if you follow the Chinese horoscope. And one of the things that metal's really good at doing is giving us clarity, so that we can focus on what it is we want to create, or what, decision that needs to be made. And interestingly, or perhaps not, because there's no such thing as coincidence, when I was working with a client yesterday, metal came up in terms of where she was in her process and journey. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then the second thing that I wanted to share with you is that there's been a bottle that has been really, really popular with clients at the moment. People keep picking it and buying it. And that's this one, which, as you can see, if you look at it, it looks like 2 types of orange, a dark orange and a light orange. It's actually an orange and a saffron gold colour. So a bit like the metal, but a bit more orangey than that. So as you look at that, how does that bottle make you feel? What do you associate with it? What comes up for you? We call this bottle the harvest. It says that all wonderful and things will come to you, and abundance will come to you. And some of that is really about what's our relationship with control. So you might want to consider what your relationship with control is. How much do you feel you need to control things in order to be safe? That was a conversation I was having with somebody earlier today. And it can be a really deep-seated thing. So you might want to sit with the word control and think, well, where does that show up in my life? What does that mean to me? And the orange represents sort of bliss and ecstasy, ultimately. And we get there really by healing up the wounds in our life. So there's a kind of really strong link to the Sacral Chakra, which is our emotional centre in our body. And if we ignore those wounds, they continue to play out. So it's almost like the inner child will sabotage anything that you're planning to do if you ignore it. So it's how do we befriend that? How do we learn, as a friend of mine was saying yesterday, to reparent ourselves, because that's what we're called to do. And if we do that, then we will have the harvest, the abundance. We will experience enlightenment and bliss. But it's quite a journey through that. And another aspect of gold is learning to surrender to what is. So those are some of my thoughts. And I think this chapter is a brilliant chapter. It's really inspirational. It talks a lot about Epictetus, who was one of the first Stoics, who was originally a slave, so could randomly be beaten at any moment, and eventually got his freedom, and he became a Stoic. And in those days, it was quite challenging to be that, and he ended up getting banished by one of the Roman emperors and ended up living in Greece and gained quite a lot of influence over time. And I think what's interesting in the book, it refers to the imperial order and how the Stoics were challenging it, a bit like the Jedi Knights in Star Wars. And I really love that analogy because I'm a bit of a Star Wars fan. So that gives you another dimension to the whole, what is Stoicism. So that gives you a flavour, and I will be back next week to talk to you about chapter 3. So whatever you're doing, wherever you are, I hope you have a wonderful week. If you want to leave a comment, please do. And yeah, I suppose the last thing I want to share, perhaps about that bottle that I shared with you, that whole process of healing our wounds, surrendering and moving forward, in some ways represents an initiation. So it can be quite challenging to up level, which is why, as well as say having something like metal to focus on, we often work with the fire spritzer for purification, but also to have the courage to make those changes. So those are my thoughts for you this week. And as I say, go well, and I look forward to being with you again soon. Bye for now.